Can British nationals who fought for the Israeli military in Gaza ever be held accountable? The author of a landmark UN report believes that they can and should.
Anyone who has served in the Israeli Defence Forces in Gaza since October 2023 must be considered a suspect for the commission of war crimes, crimes against humanity and the crime of genocide.
I'm joined now by the lawyer Chris Sidoti from the UN Commission of Inquiry, which found Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Chris, welcome to Declassified. So you're on the UN Commission of Inquiry, which has produced reports saying that there's a genocide in Gaza and Israel's committing war crimes. But when our new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, was asked about whether there's a genocide in Gaza, or even if there are war crimes in Gaza, he said that this is a matter for the courts to decide. It's not for him as a politician to make any pronouncements on that. Is he correct, or is this actually quite misleading?
I'm not really in a position to know what the new Prime Minister has in mind. I can say, though, from the point of view of the Commission of Inquiry, we have a specific mandate from the United Nations Human Rights Council to look at these issues, to look at the questions of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of genocide in Gaza. And the reports that we produce are the most authoritative reports short of having an actual verdict from a court.
A breastfeeding baby was shot by a quadcopter through the head, and the baby now suffers a permanent paralysis.
Now, so far as genocide is concerned, our report in September last year indicated that having conducted our own investigations, we came to the conclusion on reasonable grounds that the Israeli military were committing the crime of genocide in Gaza under the command of the Israeli political authorities. That is a matter that is also before the International Court of Justice, and it will take some years before the court presents its conclusions on the issue. Until then, our findings are the most authoritative available.
And Chris, in your latest report, you pointed out this issue of dual nationals serving in the Israeli military who could potentially be prosecuted when they return to the other country in which they have citizenship. And at Declassified, we actually uncovered that there were 2,000 British nationals serving in the IDF, as well as thousands of other nationals of Western countries. And this was data that the UK government wasn't keeping itself. A lawyer in Israel had to make a freedom of information request to the Israeli military to get that data out. How significant is that kind of information for the work that you do?
It's extremely significant, and we have relied upon the information obtained by Declassified UK in making comments about dual nationals who are fighting in the Israeli Defence Forces.
There are also dual citizens. Many of the citizens of these countries are serving on the Israeli Defence Forces, and when they return home, of course, action can be taken against them if the investigations into their actions show their involvement in any of the incidents that this commission has talked about in its report. So there is a variety of options available with the member states. I think this report will help them exercise those options and carry the mandate of this commission forward for ensuring justice to all victims.
There are thousands of them. The figures that the Israeli Defence Forces themselves have produced in response to that freedom of information request, and the results of that Declassified UK have made available generally, have been extremely significant in us focusing very much on Israeli soldiers, or soldiers from the Israeli Defence Forces, more accurately, who are travelling to other countries for any purposes. That includes travelling as tourists or as business people, but in particular, those who are joint nationals who are returning to their country of nationality other than Israel, having served in the Israeli Defence Forces. Our commission has indicated that, in our view, anyone who has served in the Israeli military, that is on the ground, in the air or at sea, in relation to the operations in Gaza, must be considered a suspect in the commission of war crimes, crimes against humanity and the crime of genocide. That arises from the totality of the Israeli military operation in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023. It is a military strategy of total destruction that has resulted in an enormous number of civilian casualties. far more than the 73 or 74,000 that are officially recorded as being direct casualties of the violence. If the investigation warrants prosecution, they should be prosecuted. And if they are convicted by a court of law, then they should be punished. This is simply recognition of the fact that these three categories of crime are the most serious crimes under international law.
But evidentially, do we need to tie them to like a specific unit or specifically torturing a detainee? Or if this is regarded as a genocide, is just the fact of them serving in that area, does that become a crime in itself, as with some of the Nuremberg cases, I think it did? Legally, how do these thresholds vary depending on the gravity of the crime?
For criminal conviction, some individual connection to the crime would have to be established. It's not enough, in my opinion, at this point, simply to say that because the person served in the military, that person is, from that fact alone, guilty. My point, however, is that the question of suspicion arises in relation to anybody. Suspicion is very different from conviction. Suspicion means that investigation is warranted, and if the evidence is there about some form of individual connection, then prosecution is warranted. So I have no hesitation in saying that anybody who has served in the military in relation to the Gaza operation is under suspicion and should be investigated. But the question then of individual criminal responsibility is a matter to be resolved by prosecution, by a court, and must involve some individual connection to the events alleged.
And do you think that the UK government could perhaps put in place measures or even just enforce obligations it's already signed up to try and stop British nationals going out to fight in Gaza?
I certainly consider that is essential. Most states, or many states, including mine, Australia, I don't know about the UK, have legislation prohibiting their citizens from participating in non-state armed groups. In the case of Australia, this law was introduced at the time of ISIS and ISIS international recruitment. I know that the UK has legislation dealing with the prohibition of citizens participating in terrorist groups that are so declared under UK legislation. So there is no reason whatsoever. In fact, there is every reason why there should be similar legislation about participation in international armed forces, state forces. Why should we allow our nationals to participate in the Israeli Defense Forces any more than in the Russian military or the military fighting the war in Sudan and committing war crimes there?
We actually wrote a letter to the UK government about this issue, which was signed by 26,000 people. And the response from some of the media to that letter was that we were singling out Israel, we were singling out Jewish people, and that this was somehow anti-Semitic. What do you make of that kind of response?
I would say that the legislation should cover all foreign armed forces. It should not single out Israel because this should be a standing provision. And if it doesn't single out Israel, well, then it can't be claimed to be anti-Semitic.
Britain also has not just a defence attaché, but it has a military cooperation agreement dating back to, I think, 2020 or thereabouts, which is still in force, and the details of it have never been made public. Does that concern you that the UK still has a military treaty in place with Israel during this time?
Any cooperation with the Israeli Defense Forces concerns me under the current circumstances. Any form of cooperation whatsoever. Quite clearly, there are very strong reasons to consider, to form conclusions even, that these most serious international crimes are being committed under the command of the Israeli government by the Israeli Defense Forces. And so in those circumstances, I consider it would be legally improper for states to be involved with the Israeli Defense Forces at this stage. Any kinds of cooperative arrangements raise questions of complicity, and that's a very serious issue.
The International Criminal Court is coming under huge pressure at the moment, and the UK is a founding member of that body. Do you think Britain is doing enough to stand up for the court and its important role in the world?
I don't think any of these state parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court are doing enough to defend the court and to support the court. They have obligations to do so under the Rome Statute itself. So here again, I'm not just talking about political responsibility, I'm talking about legal obligation. They have legal obligations to support the court. Now, we are seeing the United States imposing sanctions on the judges and prosecutors of the International Criminal Court, and going further and declaring a determination to dismantle the court.
We have lunatics and crazies involved in the ICC that are talking about charging members of the U.S. military, maybe even the president or a future president, with crimes. I mean, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
There are very real concerns that senior United States political leaders are committing crimes under the Rome Statute in relation to the imposition of sanctions against the International Criminal Court's judges and prosecutors. And this should be a matter of the most serious concern for every single state party to the Rome Statute. And yet we have seen no action taken by the court itself even, or by the state parties, and certainly no collective action through the assembly of the state parties in response to the United States actions. So these are particularly grave issues in themselves, quite separate from the question of Gaza and the Israeli actions in Gaza.
And Chris, you've worked in the field of human rights since at least the 1980s.
Since a long time.
Is there something about Israel's conduct in Gaza that has really shocked you, that you just hadn't seen before?
I haven't encountered this before. In my work and in my lifetime, we have seen such a deliberate policy of total destruction being implemented. It is a scorched earth policy that the Israeli military, under the command of its government, commenced on the 7th of October 2023.
And the way that various Western countries have supported Israel's attacks on Gaza, Keir Starmer famously said Israel had the right to cut off power, cut off water, and then continued to supply arms for a very long time to Israel. Does that potentially make countries like Britain culpable or complicit in some of Israel's crimes in Gaza?
Complicity in law requires positive action in international law. So mere statements of encouragement may constitute incitement, depending upon the nature of those statements, may constitute incitement to genocide under the Genocide Convention. But I don't think, from what I've read of the statements made by your former Prime Minister, I don't think they reach the point of incitement to genocide. In fact, I'm quite sure they don't. Complicity requires some form of positive action. And here the provision of weapons to a military that is undertaking actions that constitute international crimes could constitute complicity. And so there are questions that need to be investigated and resolved.
Chris, thanks for joining us. It's a real privilege to be able to talk to you about this issue, which is something we're going to keep investigating at Declassified.